Hi, welcome back to another episode of Cold Stream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to be doing more of the same of what we did last week, which was to do more body work or like more fill work on the Camera Lady's Roadster body. I got the worst piece or the most intimidating piece done, which was sanding the firewall. Has a little bit of shape to it. I'm happy with it. We got the cowl section done. Now the two bigger things to do left is the bottom here along this reveal. I've got to fill that in a little bit because like I said before, these were made from seconds. We've done a lot of metal work onto it. Things are nice and smooth, but we'll probably work on this next. And then along the back here, I've welded in place the package tray. I don't know if you want to call it that, but there's a little lip here where the upholstery would fit in. We've put some wood in place here before, but what I want to do is just basically smooth out where we've welded this all in place. So anyways, we're going to pick away at some of that. And then also we're going to do some more work on the 33 Ford chassis. I asked the owner to get me some 3/4 inch thread rod ends to go on the wishbones or ladder bars. So hopefully when we get those in place, then I can finish off laying out the rear end. The rear end is centered. It is sitting at 3 degrees. It's sitting at ride heights. It's just not leveled this way right now. So we've got to level that up that way. Get these rod ends on the end of the wishbones or ladder bars, is kind of like we're using them here. And I have to determine where the universal joint is on the back of the transmission, because that's where I want the pivot point of the ladder bars. So anyways, follow along. We're still working on 32 and 33 Fords. Well, tonight decided to work on the Camera Lady's car a little bit. We started, roughed up the bottom side of the subframe here and put my first coat of body fill onto it, and then basically cheese grated it off to get the shape. We'll wait till that dries and then do a little sand. More than likely put another coat onto it and hopefully get that one rolling. On the 33 chassis, waiting for parts to come in. So I decided to come over and finally get back to working on Ellie's coupe a little bit. Just picked a place to work. So I picked one of the worst ones, I think, by the looks of things. Kind of ground down some of the primer to reveal probably about 1.5 inch chunk of bronze weld, which is gonna have to come out. There was a large dimple right here, and there is on the opposite side too. I don't know what happened, but there's a massive crease right here. Same thing on that side and a crease there. So what I did to get that out was, fortunately on this side, the upper wood is not in place. So basically took, don't have the light, but up inside there, I had access to basically use, I took a blunted screwdriver with a rounded tip onto it, and I had a small pry bar here, right there, and levered it in, and then used a hammer to kind of dolly out the high spot. I'm going to continue doing that a little bit more and try and get at least some of the material proud. There is a bit of a crease here, so more than likely I'm going to have to put a little bead of weld into that and tighten it up. But the solution for this is probably going to have to dig it out and basically make a metal patch here to replace this from this all the way over. And then the other scary part, this car was never on the road, but they never even finished welding the top on. So I'm gonna have to cut these welds out, and we're gonna have to weld all the way around. So I think that's probably gonna be the case with all of this. A lot of the welds don't look as though they were fully done, and some of them not very nicely. So we're not going to change the chop at all. I'm just going to go around corner by corner and then cut and fix these out. So we're going to try and get this one sorted out on this episode, at least get one corner done. I think I picked the worst one, but that's okay. Better to start with the worst, and then we'll move to the easier ones. Well, I decided to cut the bronze patch out. I knew it wasn't very good on the inside, not in the sense that it was deteriorated so much, but I kind of suspected that the weld wasn't done properly for the chop. I kind of cut the gobs out, and it was more of gobs, unfortunately. I think maybe this chop was only tacked in place, because when I cut it out, as you can see, it was never welded through the A-pillars at all. So what we're going to do next, I'm going to get some little small belt sander or something. I'm going to go in there, I'm going to clean all this up, and I'm going to weld the entire A-pillar together first. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make up a small metal patch here to go across this. It'll take a bunch of little different bends, but it shouldn't be too bad. Might have to do it in 2 pieces, but I think we can do it in one big piece here and fix this side up. This corner here, like I said, I've knocked most of it out. There's a little bit of a crease here. I think what I'll do is I will put a little bit of a weld in there, and then we'll grind that flat. So we're trying to make it really good, but not metal finished, so to speak. It's perfectly acceptable in this case here to put a tiny skim of body fill in some of these areas. So at least that's what Ellie wants us to do. So anyways, we're going to carry on with some repairs on Ellie's coupe. There's a whole bunch of them like this. So if you missed this one, you'll see the next one. Well, today I'm going to be working on a 33 chassis again. We still have to work on Ellie's coupe a little bit with that sheet metal piece, but I'm switching gears today. I must say, from the comments that I got both on YouTube and privately, both for and against, I wasn't expecting as much discussion on the usage of the 36 wishbones as what I got. I completely and utterly appreciate everybody's comments for and against. Really made me think about a few things and stuff like that. As some of you may not know, my background is mechanical engineering. I do understand some of the principles of, bending moments and shear and everything else, and some of the things that people are trying to address with using these wishbones. So what we're going to do today, what I have here is an aftermarket ladder bar. Just for comparison, to put one of the things to rest was the use of the 2 bolts here. Now, I'm one size larger on these bolts. I'm using, I think, 7/16, and I think those are 3/8. One of the things, the spacing between these bolts, although it's on a horizontal plane versus a vertical plane, it actually has the same rotational strength or torque strength as what they would on the aftermarket ones. So the aftermarket ones are 4 inches apart. Those 2 bolts there are actually 4.5 inches apart. So if anything, these are going to be stronger so long as that bracket is welded properly to this axle housing. Ideally, yes, if you do a wraparound, might present a little bit more, but so long as that weld is effectively done across the bottom of it, then we shouldn't have any issues. The other thing, we're going to be using grade 8 bolts and not grade 5. The aftermarket ones have grade 5s. We're going to use grade 8, so we've got more shear strength on those bolts. Now, the other thing is the distance, again, between these ladder bars. Ideally, if we ran a bar from the top of here down to this point, that would be great. But again, we're not using super high horsepower. Yes, I know if somebody changes the motor in this in the future, but that's not something we can control. We're going to build this for the horsepower we have, plus some extra. So I think what we're going to do right now, the research I've done and the information I've seen more is related to the strength and the condition of these 36 wishbones. If they're pitted, if they're cracked, if they're bent, essentially that's more of the issue. The only failure that I saw was actually at this weld joint. Now, originally when these wishbones were on the car, it was used in conjunction with a torque tube. So yes, I think these wishbones need to be strengthened up a little bit. So what we're going to do, I think, is I'm going to get some plate and I'm going to run it from this bolt forward along this tube, effectively creating like a more of a ladder bar style kind of thing. It's not going to be as good as running the second tube across the top of it, but I don't think that we need it. I actually think that these wishbones as they are probably strong enough for our application, but we're going to beef it up anyways. I'm going to get some 1/4 inch or whatever plate I have over there, and we're going to weld a large triangle across the top of this, so that this wishbone is going to be significantly strengthened up, more in line with the way that a ladder bar is done. The other thing we're going to take from this ladder bar is I'm going to use that overall length as a guide to cut these off, and then we're going to put the ends onto it relative to those ladder bars. So anyways, again, I really appreciate everybody's opinions for and against what we're doing. I respect everybody's point of view. Please continue to comment. I'm listening to everything everybody says. We're not big enough so that I can ignore stuff. So everybody that sends a comment, I read it, I understand it, I try to take it in consideration. The other thing too, nobody mentioned it, but we should do it, but I think that we should do it, is put a panhard bar on the back. For years now, people have been using panhard bars on the front to prevent shimmy side to side. And a lot of the applications now by some of the bigger chassis makers, when they use a transverse leaf rear spring for suspension, they're putting panhard bars on to prevent potential side-to-side shimmy. So we're going to be working on that as well. So after a little bit of work here, this is what I've come up with for the split wishbone / ladder bars. I guess have to call them ladder bars now, but we're just using the original bones. As you can see right here, I've attached the 3/4 inch rod end, much the same as it was on the ladder bar, the purchased one. Not sure where that came from. Could have been TCI, Pete and Jake's, or someone else, or Roadster shop. I'm not really sure where it came from. Kind of neat because it's actually got an extra adjuster here that you can actually adjust it on the car without actually taking it off and undoing these nuts. So kind of like that idea. That's one thing that we can't do with the ones that we've made here, is that basically it's going to go on. We're going to set her at 3 degrees, and that's kind of where it's going to stay. So as you can see, what I've done, I've put a 1-inch square tubing across the top. I've gusseted it along the way, kind of like what you would do with a truss. So what that has done is, instead of all of the load, the bending moment being here across this short period, this short space, which is where they typically fail, I've now increased it to here. So when the rear end twists, basically the top one is going to be on compression and this one is going to be on tension. So there'll be like a bending moment go through here. The likelihood of this breaking compared to what we have here, I think, has increased 3 or 4 times. I haven't done a calculation onto it. It's been many years since I've had to do stuff like that. But what I think we've done is we've significantly increased the strength of that bar. And now, right now, I've run out of battery on my grinder, but I'm well on the way of doing the second one over here on the bench. Just have to continue on the very end there. The tube was actually a little short, so we're welding a piece in. I mean, basically, the premise of this kind of thing is more or less like building a truss in a house. You've got a main beam across the bottom, one across the top, and it basically carries the load much easier than a single piece. So, like I said, I'll finish that one up. We'll clean it up, probably throw a coat of paint on them, and then we'll start fitting them in the chassis. Carrying on with the installation of the 9-inch Ford rear end, I made up the second ladder bar now, as I'm going to call it. They're not wishbones anymore because they're basically ladder bars. A little bit more robust than what they were before. Quite happy with them. I think the people that, commented on using just the bare bones, old bones as they were, hopefully they'll be satisfied that, we've made something stronger and certainly going to handle much more torque on the rear end. They're not fully welded in yet. So right now what I've done is I tack welded in the rear lower shock mounts. And hopefully we can position down there. I don't know if you can see them real well or not, but right there. The shocks are at 20 degrees right now, at a compressed height, the ride height, or might be sitting about an inch lower than what ride heights will be, but we're in that ballpark. So what I got left to do now, before I weld anything in, I want to make a forward mount for the ladder bars there. So I'm going to use a piece of 1x2 square tubing. Going to make some tabs up. More than likely those pivot points will actually sit just below the frame. Right now I kind of just had the jacks in there to kind of position it, make sure we've got clearances for the shocks, and estimate the actual pivot points. So I've double checked it two ways. I've made those ladder bars the same length as what the ones, the purchased ones were. And then I double checked the length of the transmission and the engine off of our 32 Roadster chassis, which has got a Y block and AOD transmission. And I measured basically from the front end of the car back to where the pivot point is, and we're plus or minus an inch probably of where the Hemi and the transmission pivot point is going to be. So we're in the right place. What I want to do though, like I said, I'm going to make that 1x1 tubing, make the tabs, and then we're going to have those pivot points actually underneath, so they'll hang down just for clearance and everything else. So anyways, once I get some of those pieces cut up and welded up, then we'll go to the next phase. So right now in the process of figuring out how to attach the rod ends to the frame, going back and forth on our 32 Roadster chassis. We've got a Y block with an attached AOD and a spacer onto it, so I can actually have some sort of frame of reference to what the Hemi and the Turbo 350 is going to be. They're not exactly the same, but we're going to be close to the same ballpark. And the way that it fits in the frame. The one conclusion that I have drawn, and when we were constructing this X-frame, even though we copied it almost to the inch or quarter inch off of a TCI style X member, I pretty much had assumed that we're going to have to cut that lower piece out there to clear the engine and the transmission coming in. And going back and forth on ours, on our 32 frame, which is a little bit shorter than a 34 frame, but still same kind of clearances. What I've concluded is that even with the bar that we're going to make across here to put our tabs on to attach these bars, we're going to need to drop it like what we've done right there. One thing, I thought about taking these ladder bars and lowering them and having them underneath the frame, but the conclusion I drew was that I would like to have them parallel to the ground at ride height. So if I did drop them, then they'd actually be pointing down when the body's loaded up. So I'd like to have those as parallel and as flat at the fully loaded or drive height condition. So that puts them kind of into this position that we see here, which is not uncommon. But what I said, I'm going to have to make a dropped bracket. So instead of cutting it a bunch of 45s, I decided, you can cut it 45s, got the chops on, everything else. But I said, well, why not just take a bunch of pie cuts out of this? So basically, I set up my angle like this at 22.5 degrees, decided to do 45-degree cuts onto it. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to clamp this to here. I'm going to weld all of those up and make it strong. So this way, what I noticed with our frame is that the drive shaft actually spins just below this point here. So we need to make the clearance for the drive shaft to be there. So I'm assuming it's that the other engine and transmission is going to fit somewhere to here. Basically at the same kind of height, the same kind of angle, and then we're just going to have the clearance for it before we put it in. So anyways, I'm going to weld that up. We're going to cut that to fit the frame. We'll tack it in place. We'll cut the other piece out, and then I'm going to start making, oops, sorry, I don't mean to spin the camera too much, start making some tabs for the rod ends that would connect to this new cross member. So there we go. Like I described earlier, I cut the original piece out from underneath the center cross member, and now this dropped cross member we have here right now, that's going to clear the drive shaft. So we've got now the ladder bars. I'm not going to call them split wishbones anymore because they're really ladder bars. I'm going to actually start making some tabs. Most of the tabs I've seen, even purchased, are actually 125 wall or 1/8, but we're going to use 3/16 in this case. Two reasons. One, just factor safety, and I guess the most other common reason is that's what I've got. Don't really need to go much thicker than that, I don't think. So I'm going to make up some 3/16 tabs with 1/2" holes into them. Going to weld them up against this bracket. Hopefully we're going to do like a little, I plan to do something actually that puts the tabs not just butt welded to this face, but actually puts them up into and over the 1x2 there. So we have like a larger weld surface that those tabs are going to weld onto. So anyways, we're making some progress on the getting the 9-inch Ford rear end in here and the 33 Ford chassis. I think it's looking good. I'm happy with it. And I think from a strength point of view, I think we've massive difference here by reinforcing those rods. It's more, looks a little bit traditional from underneath, but at least from the top, we got something more modern as far as strength goes and everything. So there's the tabs welded on. Hopefully you can see there. I basically made like a U joint, or whatever you want to call it, so that the tabs actually wrapped around the 1x2, so I'd have a longer weld joint. And I used 3/16 instead of 1/8, as I said. So I've done that both sides. I've welded underneath, and I've actually welded both sides of each one of these flanges. Probably a little overkill, but I'm a pretty decent welder. But if I have 2 3/4 welds, then I've got, anyways, it's a little bit extra is not going to hurt. So next up will be to do the final check on the rear end and to make sure everything is still square. I don't think it's moved, but we're going to double check it anyways. And then I'm going to tack those brackets to the rear end. The shock mount brackets are tacked, and we'll tack the ladder bar mounts. Once I'm satisfied with that and everything's good, then I'll pull the rear end out and I'll do a full weld along both sides. But unfortunately, today's Thanksgiving. Well, the good thing, today's Thanksgiving. So if Canadians are watching this, happy Thanksgiving for American friends. Yours is coming in November. We have ours in October. But the unfortunate part was I ran basically out of gas, and I burnt out. Didn't burn out, but I used up all my batteries. So got to wait for the batteries to charge up for the grinding. And tomorrow, today's a holiday, so tomorrow I will go get another tank of gas. Then hopefully wrap up welding the rear end here into the 33 Ford. A little tiny bit of progress on Ellie's coupe. As I said at the beginning of the video, was to try and get at least one weld fixed on the chop. So right now we've got a little bit of weld up here. I've got another little crack there I've got to fill in. And we should have something relatively smooth there. Filled in a patch here. Managed to get the welds all the way through the A-pillar, which they never were before. And then welded on the inside, and then wrapped around the corner there. So we've got welds all the way through 360. There's a hole inside here because there's supposed to be a hole. We've got to still put sheet metal on this. So in addition to the B-pillar being welded on the inside, the sheet metal will also add a little bit of the strength to it, but a lot better than where we were before. Then as far as the rear end on the 33 chassis, I did double check the wheelbase, the angle, and everything else, and then we spot welded the brackets in place on the 9-inch Ford rear end. So next up on that basically is to pull everything apart and then do the complete welds on them. And then tonight, got a little bit more done on the camera lady's body here. We've got the sills, you can see it there. I've got the sills done on both sides, and now I'm starting on the doors. The doors were new door skins, but one thing about when you hammer a door skin on, you get a little bit of a ripple along the edge. If I can show you what I mean, there's quite a bit here. When you're folding the edge over, you've got a little bit of a ripple there. So what I'm going to do on these doors, I'm just going to skim all the way around and then sand it smooth, so that if there's anything highs or lows, I mean, if there's a high, I'll try to knock it out, obviously, but it's mostly just a couple lows and stuff from when we hammered the door skin on. So we're going to carry on with that, see how far we can get moving on that. Well, I got the A-pillar finally patched up on Ellie's coupe. We've got one piece done. Haven't been working on it very much, but I really wanted to get something done on this episode. So one A-pillar is welded on the inside. I made a piece of a patch to go across here. It's quite complex little bends and stuff. I normally use 18 gauge, but the metal here is quite thin. So what I took a piece of 20 gauge, and quite literally, in order to make all these bends and curves, I just took the sheet metal between two pieces of sheet metal vice grips and just kept bending it until I got the right shape. Probably should have done it on time lapse or something like that. So we still have to do the other side. So what I'll do on the other side, and it's going to be the same technique. So I'll try and cover that. It would just, I don't know if you want to call it a MacGyver approach, but at the end of the day, you know, bending the metal to meet the form that you need, use whatever you got, whether you go on the bench with the vise or you've got a $5,000 piece of equipment, a Pullmax or something with the shape onto it, whatever it takes. But, you know, a lot of times you can just manipulate the metal with just the tools you have, and that's what I did in this case here. So that's it for this week of Coldstream Rod Shop. We got quite a bit done on the 33 chassis. We've got the ladder bars all sorted out. I think everybody's going to be a lot happier with what we did with that. I still have to take it all apart and do the final welds and do some paint, but essentially everything is in. The geometry is good. It's basically ready to kind of finish it in place. And then I got a little bit more work done on the camera lady's 32 Ford Roadster body. So gonna have to try and get a push on to get that done, because I don't want to be painting that in the cold weather. So anyways, that's it for this week of Coldstream Rod Shop. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Come on back next week and see what we're up to. Everybody have a great week and take care.